Hey friend, Graham Cochrane here. Going a little bit different format today. I want to go a little more casual and a little more long format due to the nature of the discussion I want to have today. And the discussion is how much money is enough for us to be happy? How much income, how much annual income, how much business revenue, since we're talking about growing our businesses, how much is enough for us to be happy? And I think this is an important conversation to have. Generally, you start a business for a lot of reasons, but one of them is to make a living. I think that's like the most basic thing I could have said. But we start a business to make a living, ideally doing something we love to do. So money needs to change hands, and money is important. Money is how we function in modern society. So we're all after a certain amount of money. And what I think is interesting and dangerous is when we don't know how much is enough, when we don't have a target. So I did something interesting last week. I jumped on Instagram and I asked my followers two simple questions. One, how much money do you currently make annually? And how much money would you need to make for it to be enough? What is your goal to be enough? If I made this amount of money, I would be happy. Now, I posted it on Insta stories, asked people to private message me so no one would know. If they wanted to share, the only person that they'd be sharing it with is myself. And so I thought, you know what? This might be a good opportunity to see if A, people care about this conversation, which turns out they did. B, are people willing to open up about how much they actually make, which is a very taboo subject in modern society for some reason. I think the numbers show in recent articles in the last couple of years that people are more open and more willing to talk about their sex life than they are to talk about how much money they make, which is very interesting to me. So are people going to keep that close to the vest, or are they going to be open with that with someone like me? Do I have their trust? And then I was really curious to see, what is that magic number? And more interestingly, what is that magic number in relation to what they currently make? Because everyone makes a different amount of money. So what I want to do is break down a few numbers for you first, point out my findings, and then unpack it real briefly. So this is interesting. So I pulled up all the responses that I got. Everybody that responded with what they currently make and then what their ideal income would be, I sort of mapped that all out. Just so you know, the lowest annual income that I received was, as all calculated to US dollars, because I have some non-American followers, was $23,000 a year. That was the lowest reported amount of annual income. And the highest reported amount of annual income was $230,000 a year. Those were the opposite ends of the spectrum, but most were in the middle and closer to lower amount. Here's what I found out. Okay, average desired annual income was $91,750 US. That's the average of what everybody desired to make. Now, averages are deceiving because if you have some big extremes on the high end or the low end, they can throw off the average. If you were to take those out and actually look at a more helpful number like the median, right? The median is literally the middle, meaning half of the respondents want more than this and half the respondents want less. So I think median target income is more relevant to our discussion. What is the number that most people it's dead in the middle of what most people want to be making to be enough, and that is $80,000. According to my random Instagram poll of my random followers, and these are from people in America and Europe primarily that responded, $80,000 is the target desired income. That would be enough for most people. Now, what's interesting also is the percentage increase, okay? Because the amount of money is one thing, but the percentage increase is interesting. Like, what's the average percent more than what people currently make? So if someone makes $25,000, they may not want $80,000. But what do they want in relation to what they have? How much more money, percentage-wise, do you need to feel like you have enough? The average percent of a raise that people would love to have, the average percent increase that people would love to have to feel like they're making enough is 94%. 94%. Okay? This is fascinating. And just before we jump into that, the lowest desired annual income, there was one respondent who said that they desired $21,000 a year, that they would be happy with that. That'd be enough. Just to give you some perspective, that was the lowest desired annual income, and the highest was $1 million a year. Okay. Kind of a big number. I think it's sort of like more like a goal. But the average percent increase that everybody wanted across the board was 94%. So let's talk about point number one. The numbers of my little survey report that basically, if you just want to break it down into layman's terms, basically across the board, people will be happier if they're making just about double what they're making now. That would be enough. We had a respondent who makes $25,000 a year, and his or her target goal was $50,000 a year, double, okay? But I also had a respondent who made $50,000 a year, and his or her target goal was $100,000 a year. Do you see the interesting pattern here? Whatever people are making, they're used to, and they could see themselves being happier if they had just about double what they're currently making. The question I have is, how can someone who's earning $25K a year be happy with $50K a year when there are same people that are following me who are already making $50K a year and they're not happy, and they would only be happy if they're making $100K a year? There must be something about that relative income. We're used to whatever we make, and relative to what we make, if I just had double what I made, my life would be freaking amazing. Okay, and there's certain factors in here that we need to consider. Certainly, there's cost of living is different depending on where you live, right? Different states, countries, cities, neighborhoods, right? So depending on where you live, it may cost more than the next person that responded to me on Instagram. That is a factor. Financial obligations are different across the board. Some people have a lot of debt. Others don't. That's going to affect how much money you would need to make to feel comfortable, right? If you're servicing the debt, if you have a big income but a big debt, you're no different than someone with a small income and no debt, right? It's all about relative income, okay? There's also other financial obligations beyond debt. There's people that have children, or a family in general, or multiple children, or special needs children, or in-laws or parents living with them. There's different other financial obligations for some people versus people who are single, or they're dinks, right? Dual income, no kids, D-I-N-K, dinks. So everyone's financial obligations are different. Your cost of living is different. Those things play a role, but I think there's just something psychological about just wanting more. We really think we'd be happy if we had more, no matter how much we make. Actually, only one person, I was hoping this would happen, only one person responded to me, only one, who said that they actually already make enough money, that they could actually live off of less and still be happy. And they didn't have a very, very large income, by the way. It was certainly under six figures. It's not surprising to me. It's sad. There's a reason why I did this survey. There's a reason why I opened up this can of worms. And there's a reason why I want to have this discussion, because I know there's problems in our culture. I know that we're skewed. But to see the numbers come in and they basically validated my hypothesis, it was both fascinating and sad at the same time. Only one person feels like they make enough. So what we learned is that people would generally be happy enough, they'd be satisfied if they made virtually double what they're making now, no matter what their income level is, from $25K a year to even over six figures. People would be happier if they made double. Now, there were a number of people who responded to me, but they never told me how much they currently make. So they only responded with how much would be enough for them. So I couldn't include them in this first round of data because I couldn't compare to what they're making to what they would like to make. But I didn't want to rule them out because they still had valuable information to offer. What they shared was ideal income as just a target, as just an arbitrary target. Without knowing their situation, without knowing their current amount of annual income, I was looking for patterns to see Is there a magic number across the board in terms of US dollars? And I converted everything, whether it's British pounds or euros, I converted everything. I was looking for a magic number. Is there an amount of money that we psychologically say that would make me happy? That would be enough. Turns out there are two magic numbers, okay? Virtually everyone who responded that just told me what their ideal amount of income would be, down the middle, almost 50-50, it was one of these two numbers. Either $75,000 a year would make them happy, or $100,000 a year. 75K or 100K. Sure, these are nice round numbers, but I think there seems to be something magic about the numbers. I want to show you something. The median household income in the US as of 2016 is right around $59,000. Okay. Again, remember, median is right in the middle. It's not the average, because you've got people making $1 billion throwing off the curve, and you got people who make nothing throwing off the curve. So median is if you took every household in America and you split it down the middle, half of America makes more, half of America makes less. What's the dollar amount per year right in the middle? That's the absolute middle of the road American household, and that's $59,000 US. Okay. Median household income, 59. It makes sense then that I would see this pattern of 75K and 100K, because 75K would be like a nice, to the median household income, so let's just say the average American household, that'd be a nice 27% bump in pay. That's a game changer. If I were to come to you today and I were your boss and I said, I'm going to give you a 27% raise this year. Dude, how awesome. I mean, nobody gets 27%. I mean, some people do, CEOs generally. But 27% of a bump one day to the next would be game changing. You would be able to start paying off debt. You'd be able to start funding your retirement account, which you should be doing, by the way. You'd be able to start giving more, which hopefully you should be doing, by the way. You'd probably be able to increase your standard of living a little bit. Maybe you take a vacation you wanted to take, or you eat out a little bit more. These are things that make, statistically, from what we see in surveys, make people feel wealthier when they're able to take trips and travel, or they're able to go to a restaurant. They feel wealthy when they're doing those things. Now, a lot of times we're doing those with credit cards and we don't have the money for them, so we're feeling wealthy, but we're just going backwards financially. But if you actually had the money in your budget to do those things more regularly, these are all things you could do with a 27% bump in pay. So 75K makes a lot of sense for the average American household. That would be a big bump. That would be game-changing financially. And then 100K makes a lot of sense also, because at that stage, that's a 69% pay increase. So if you were getting a 69% raise as the median household in America, run-of-the-mill average household in America, that's you're unstoppable at that point. You can pay off debt faster, save more, give more, bump up your lifestyle a little bit more, and still have extra. That's game-changing money. So it makes sense to me that the average respondent to my survey is saying, man, 75K would be incredible. Okay? Or 100K would be incredible. And so a lot of the people that said 75K, even in the numbers that I got of what they actually currently make versus what they could make, 75K is usually people that are making in the 30s and 40s. They saw 75K as like a dream number. And then the people that wanted 100K, they were generally making more than 50. They were like making 60 to 70. So in essence, it was still a relative pay bump of at least 50%. But like I said, across the board, the average desired pay increase was 91%. So we basically would like double, but it seems like 75K or 100K are magic numbers for most real people. Now that we have the numbers out of the way, I just want to discuss this a little bit, and I want to get some takeaways from this, with my goal being to encourage you. Okay, I believe that encouragement is needed across the board for all of humanity, especially for you if you are a small business owner, or you are a freelancer, or you're starting a business, or you're a content creator online. You need encouragement, because it is hard. It's hard to build something from scratch. It's hard to set out and do something new. It's hard to quit a job and pivot and transition into self-employment. It's scary and hard. Okay, I know, because I live it. I've lived it when it wasn't working. It's also hard when it is working, because there's so many factors out of your control, and things change and industries change, and you're always growing and learning. So preface being, I want to encourage you, and the goal of this video is to help, okay? Not to condemn, not to make anyone feel bad, okay? I don't know you personally. I don't know your financial situation or your financial obligations. I don't know if you've got $90,000 of student loan debt. I don't know if you have been having to pay for everything yourself even since you were a teenager. I don't know if you have 5 kids and 3 of them are special needs. I don't know if your husband left you and you're trying to raise 2 kids on your own. I don't know what your situation is. Only you know what your financial needs are. But I want to help you because I want you to see success and I want you to see financial freedom. And when I say that word, what do you mean? Freedom from what? Freedom from slavery, worry, fear, and doubt. Okay, what do I mean by slavery? I think, and I talk about this a lot, I think as Western society, especially in America, we are slaves to money. We love money. We know we need money. And we think money, more of it, will make us happy. The numbers just showed if I only had 91% more than I'm making, I'd be happy. People would love to be making 6 figures. 100K seems to be a magic number for people everywhere. We think that more money will satisfy us, okay? And so let's dive into that for a minute. I like to question things in a healthy way because I want to get to the bottom of things and I want to get to the truth of things because I don't want to just accept everything I hear as fact just because culture is screaming it loudly. Even respected people who I love and respect, even if they're screaming it and preaching it, I still want to wrestle through with it in my own mind and make sure that it's true. Because if it's not true, I don't want to give my life to it or build my life on it. So I had a couple of takeaways from running this math, and it was a fascinating experiment for me. One is, no matter how much money we make, the numbers point that we all seem to want more. What does that tell us? That tells us that maybe there's never enough. Maybe enough doesn't exist. Why is that functionally? Well, think about it. Do you make more money now than you made 15 years ago? I think probably most of us, that's probably true across the board. Unless you just lost a job or you're in a weird season of transition, you probably make a lot more than you made 15 years ago. Are you a lot happier than you were 15 years ago? Are you a lot more at peace than you were 15 years ago? Or are you a lot more relaxed and secure in your heart than you were 15 years ago? Or do you have more anxiety? Are you more worried about the future and your finances? Are you more stressed about work and the business? What does that tell us? That tells us that our lifestyles basically inflate. They inflate to whatever our income is. And we know this, that the numbers show this everywhere. Every study shows this, right? But on the whole, there's obviously exceptions to this. As we make more money, we spend more. Typically, this happens in a couple of main categories, right? We move up in house is the biggest category that typically we do. We want to figure out how much we can afford, and that's how much house we want, which is predicated on a bunch of assumptions. It's predicated on the assumption that you always want the most expensive house you can afford, whatever that means, that you always want the biggest house you can afford, the nicest house you can afford, so that the only reason you're not living in that neighborhood or in that size house is because you can't afford it yet. And if your income were to increase, then you would be able to afford it, which assumes that you want it as soon as you can afford it, which is funny. You know, you've got guys like Warren Buffett. Multiple times in history, he's been the richest man in the world, multi-billionaire, arguably the greatest investor of the 20th century. He still lives in the same house he bought in 1958 for $11,000. He's a multi-billionaire. He's still living in a 60-year-old home that's long been paid off, that I think is about 1,000 square feet, maybe 1,500 square feet. Small old home in Omaha, Nebraska. He could afford any house he wants. Nah, he just didn't. So I think we move up in house by default. We move up in car. That's one reason why car payments in general, I won't even go to car payments today. Let's not talk about it today. We'll save that for another day. But we move up in house, we move up in car. And then those are the big easy ones. Then there's the sort of phantom costs. We move up in home decor and furnishings. We move up in vacations and trips. We move up in toys, technology, phones, computers, eating out. None of those things are bad. Having a nice house isn't bad. Having a nice car isn't bad. Taking nice trips aren't bad. But do you see what I'm saying is that as our income increases, statistically, we raise our standard of living to match that income, which means it doesn't matter how much more we make, we never feel that feeling of, I make more than I need. Remember, only one person responded to me and said that I make enough. That person is the freest of us all, because that person has figured out that he or she already has enough. This is fascinating to me. So we never feel like we have enough no matter how much we make. So that means that if you were to get what you wanted, statistically, you want 91% more, you want to double your income, it's not going to make you happier, because statistically, you're going to want double down the road. And maybe it takes you a few years. I've shared before that as my income increased over the years with my business, initially my happiness increased along with it. But then there came a point where my happiness flatlined and plateaued, and then my business continued to increase revenue-wise, and my happiness went down. I covered this in a previous video, but there's a reason that yes, you will feel like you have enough for a while, but then as your lifestyle inflates, it'll suck back up all the income, and then you'll be left wanting more. Okay, so that's one takeaway. Number two, there does seem to be some logical breathing room if you make between 75K and 100K a year. I don't want to downplay that amount. There are some things that cost the same amount of money no matter how much you make in this country or anywhere, right? Food is one of them. Groceries, gas for your car is another. Okay, those are two big ones. And then rent, or a mortgage, but even let's just say rent. Like there, at some point, we all have to pay the same amount for groceries. We all have to pay the same amount for gas, and we all have to pay the same minimums for rent. Like if in my city, there's only but so low you can go for rent, no matter how much you make. So I understand that for some categories, and these are some major categories, we all have to spend the same amount. So those who make 75K to 100K, there is more breathing room than someone who's making 30K or 40K as a household. So I'm not downplaying that if you make 30 or 40 and if things feel tight, that you would probably feel better off if you made 75 or 100. I think there is some truth to that. There's a reason why those numbers come up over and over again. Because again, the median household income is less than that. It's 59. So that would be more than what people are actually making. And I think those are great goals. I think 75K a year is a great goal. There's other studies that I've seen that show levels of happiness peak and do hit a peak at 75K. People are statistically happier at 75K a year than they are at 50, but that happiness peaks at 75K. It doesn't get higher as their income goes into the six figures and multiple six figures. So there might be some truth to that as a magic number. And I don't want to downplay that. But just keep in mind the previous point that the more we make, we never seem to be happy. We always want more, no matter what income level we're at. We find a way to want or need more. And then that brings me to a final point, which is so much of this income thing is dependent on our actual expenses. Okay. So many of these are within our control. Not all, like the ones I talked about. A lot of them aren't, but even groceries can be in your control if you're smart at the grocery store. But the price of groceries is not in your control, but what you buy in your control, okay? But there's a lot of expenses that are in your control. And so just something to consider here, and we could talk about this in another video. In fact, I plan to if the interest is there. One way to make more is to need less. Okay? There is a time-honored tradition in all of history but especially in the history of this country, America. America was built on the concept, many concepts, but one of which was frugality. Hard work and frugality. People worked hard, and then they kept the money they worked hard for. They didn't spend it all. They were wise with their money. They kept their needs low so that they could get ahead financially, whether that meant building a house or buying a home or starting a business or setting their kids up for success for the future, making their next generation better off financially than they were. That's the history of America. We've lost that. We're conditioned to spend. And so we can blame advertising and marketing, some of which is really, really well done, by the way. And there's a reason why they can get us to spend. It's powerful stuff. But ultimately, they don't make us spend our money. We're responsible for our spending habits, okay? So part of having enough is choosing to need less. If you make $59,000 a year, the median household income, and you are short $10,000 a year to achieve your goals, your happiness, you want to make $70K, you could either try to make $70K or you could need $10,000 less. And that might sound ridiculous to you, but there are people that do it all the time. We could talk about how to do that. We'll talk about how to do that in another video, but just I want to put that idea in your head that you have control of your expenses. And if you spend less and need less, then you don't need as much income to be happy. Now let's wrap this thing up with a really, really important truth. Here's what I think is true. And I think we need to wrestle with this and then be honest with ourselves about it so that we can find joy and freedom as we pursue growing our businesses. I am not ashamed of growing my business or wanting to make it better. And I'm not ashamed of wanting to find a way to increase my income. I have personal reasons for that. I feel like I can do a lot of good with more income. And we've talked about that before, and we can talk about that in other places. So I'm not ashamed of that, not afraid of that. But I want to challenge the idea that we need more money, because I think the truth is that more will never be enough. It will never be enough. And I'd like to quote somebody who's a little bit smarter than me, because I think that more will never be enough unless we decide that we make enough. And I think it's virtually in our control to say, I make enough, instead of putting that responsibility on some future increase. So here's a quote for you. I think the ancient Israelite ruler King Solomon said it best. One of historically the wealthiest men ever, historically, and then one of the wisest kings ever to rule Israel, and has written so many amazing sayings and truth bombs in both the book of Proverbs and the book of Ecclesiastes in the Bible. And here's what Solomon said in Ecclesiastes. Again, I saw vanity under the sun, one person who has no other, either son or brother, yet there is no end to all his toil, and his eyes are never satisfied with riches, so that he never asks, for whom am I toiling and depriving myself of pleasure? This also is vanity and an unhappy business. His eyes are never satisfied with riches, so that he never asks, for whom am I toiling and depriving myself of pleasure? This is such a sad question and a sad comment, but I think this describes most of us business owners, most of us Americans, but especially business owners. We don't know what enough is. We think more will satisfy when the truth is it won't satisfy. So we give up everything. We sacrifice evenings, dinners with our family, vacations on our phones, sleep, health, whatever it is. We sacrifice it at the altar of growing our business so we can hit that magic number, whatever that number is for you, okay? And when we get there, it never satisfies. And we never stop to ask ourselves, why am I doing this? Why am I depriving myself of pleasure? And pleasure can just be spending time with the people I love, or resting and reading a good book, or just sleeping a little bit longer. You don't need to push and push. And if you can figure out what that number is, that income goal, and if you can lower it, if you can be honest with yourself and create a realistic target, or maybe Ask yourself, am I already at that target? I just need to change a little bit of the way I'm living. You can finally find some freedom. You can finally have some peace because you know that you are making enough. That's why the word enough is so powerful. But if we view it as always out of our grasp, we're never going to arrive there. But if we decide to say, this is enough for me, we can arrive there. And that's the crazy thing. At the end of the day, we're after happiness. We're after satisfaction and the security that a healthy income can provide. But the funny thing is all those things are relative. If you can manipulate your lifestyle, manipulate your mindset in order to be happy and secure on less income, then there's less pressure on your business to make 6 figures or multiple 6 figures or 7 figures. The pressure's gone. When there's no pressure, you don't do stupid, desperate things. You can do wise, slow, diligent, steady, systematic things that over the long haul will pay off. And in the meantime, you can enjoy your life, enjoy your business, view it as an asset to your life, not as a liability, something that steals everything from you and offers little in return. And the irony is you can probably generate the profit you need and work less, which gives you more of the other currency, I would argue the better currency than money, which is your time. Now, I want to ask you a question. You don't have to answer this question out loud, but in your head, how much income a year is enough for you? I want you to think about how much is enough for you. And then, could you be happy? Could you be satisfied on less than that amount? Is it possible for you? Think about that. You don't have to share anything you don't want to share, but leave a comment below if any of this has resonated with you. Whatever you want to share, it's okay. If you've had some success in this area, if you've wrestled through finding out what enough is, share it. Let me know. I'd love to start a discussion with you and go wherever you want to go. As always, thanks for watching. Thanks for subscribing, and thanks for being a part of what I'm trying to accomplish here. I'll see you on another video real soon.